and welcome back to another episode of The Real Franchise, a podcast that goes where others simply won't. An unfiltered view of franchising, business, mindset, and everything that we stand for when it comes to supporting a community of small business owners. Join me, Rhiannon, the CEO for James Home Services Australia, and Justin, one of our owners, as we unpack it all with no topics off limits. Today, we're talking about getting out. I just don't think there's another franchise network in this country who has ever publicly spoken about, let alone published an entire video talking about how to get out of the franchise agreement. But Justin, today, that is exactly what we are going to spend the next 20 minutes talking about. It is how to get out of your franchise agreement. Justin, I think most people think when they sign a franchise agreement that whatever the term of that agreement is, ours is 5, but there are terms with some of our competitors up to 20 and 30 years. I think people assume that they are locked in for that whole period of time, no matter what. Is that the case?
No. It's a contract. Obviously, I have people say, oh, do you have a lock-in contract? Well, we have a contract, as does every business. But for myself, I haven't always been the owner of James. I bought a franchise with James. That's how I came in. And I've had, amongst other things, with James, 3 cleaning franchises. Each of those franchises I sold, and each of them I sold in that 2 to 3 year mark.
Okay. So
yet for each business I signed a 5-year contract.
Yeah. I honestly think it's probably one of the bigger misconceptions in franchising, isn't it? And I think that's why so many people, they think about starting a business. They know that franchising is an option, but then they also just have this belief or this understanding that once you sign, you're locked in. And it's honestly not the case. And I certainly know for our franchise agreement, because I don't really make a habit of reading everybody else's franchise agreement. So today we're talking about ours intimately, but, we can't comment on our competitors, obviously. But honestly, ours is so easy to get out of, so easy. So we're going to dive into the 3 ways that you can exit a franchise agreement or our franchise agreement, but these are pretty common. And the first one is sale. Can you talk us through, can you sell your business at any time?
Absolutely.
What's the go with a sale? Can you sell a business any time? What does it look like?
Look, I always say as you know, everyone that goes from this point that wants to find out more, we take you through an information process. So it'll be with me or one of our team. And part of that first information session, we talk about this openly. And a bit of personal advice I always share to everyone. It's not necessarily in our presentation, but every single person I personally say to them, in my opinion, any business that you ever do in your life, literally from day one, I believe you should have in the back of your mind that at some point in the future, whatever the business is, at some point in the future, you're going to want to move on. You might want to retire. You might want to shift countries, state, whatever. Life happens. It could be a terrible health diagnosis, right? So whatever the business is, I believe from day one, you should be building an asset.
Can we pause on that for a second? I'm only going to deviate for a minute here. Can we just normalize the fact that planning an exit from day one is so smart? Yes. I used to work as a business consultant, and people would come to us and sit down and say, I want to start a business. And I would say, great, how do you want to exit? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm excited about starting this business. And I said, my biggest piece of advice, start with the end in mind.
That's what I say. Those words exactly. Start with the end in mind.
Yeah. Because it's normal, right? We all get focused on this, which is starting the business, coming together with James or a consultant, or maybe it's just you, right? But we get so excited about starting the business. And in all reality, we go along like this for a little while, and then this happens. You and your business will separate at some point in time. It's totally normal. And I think that the franchising industry gets a little caught up in this idea of a term and that you're chained to your business forever. And it's not the case. At some point, we understand that every business owner who's currently in our network running a business will want to exit. And it's so normal for us to help with that process. All right, I'm going to bring us back to what we're talking about, which is a sale. And so I think probably it's one of the reasons why we focus so much on getting our business owners established as quickly as we do, because in order to sell a business, you've got to have a saleable asset, right? But really what that means is that it just needs to be somewhat profitable.
Yes.
It needs to be somewhat profitable. It needs to have a customer base. You know, it comes with a website, with branding, with reputation, with marketing, all of that we provide anyway. So you haven't got to worry about it. So as long as you build a bit of a regular customer base and your business is profitable, you've got something that someone else probably wants to buy.
That's right. Because we talk to people all the time that are like, do you have any existing businesses? You know, and, you know, if you've got a business turning over $2,000 to $5,000 or whatever it is, someone looking at that goes, great. You know, I don't have to start from zero. You know, it'd be so nice to know I've got $2,000 a week coming in. And our system, as you know, tracks every single job. Yeah. You know, everything in your business, if you join us, is tracked so that a buyer can go, great, I know exactly what I'm going. There's not two sets of books. It's like everything we do, it's clear, it's transparent, and it's honest, and people can walk in and take over. I mean, all of our business coaches, as you know, bar Pia, all of the others have sold their business. Pia, her husband, still runs their cleaning business, but all of our business coaches have done exactly this, build a business and sold it. And you know, we've employed them to help people do the same. It's part of having a business. I use the example of a house. You know, the great Australian dream for probably everyone listening to this is I want to own my own home, or I do have a home. Well, obviously, you know, at some point in time you're going to sell. Yeah. You know, it might be your estate selling it, but most likely it'll be within the next few. So you're working on your house. Everything you do in your house isn't to trash it. Everything you're doing in the back of your mind, you're thinking, is this going to add value? Is this going to make more? Oh, wow, look how much values have gone up in my neighborhood. My house is worth more now. Like, that's a normal house owner thought pattern. It's exactly the same with a business.
Yeah, it really is. So you build something and then you can sell it. And honestly, it's the easiest and the quickest. And frankly, like that's literally just the easiest way to get out of a franchise agreement. Build something that's got a bit of value to it. I think the other thing people think is, my business has got to be turning over, you know, multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars in order for it to be worth anything in a sale. And it's just not true. I think what people, you know, there are buyers in the market at all stages. Yes, there are people looking for significantly profitable, well-established businesses. We've seen those resell in our network. But we've also seen resell in our network businesses that are just profitable. And then in that case, what the buyer is buying is just a little bit of security that when they start their business, they're starting with 10 customers already, you know, that $1,000 a week already locked away in the bank. And it's just that little bit of extra security that they felt they needed to get going. And whilst maybe you're not going to be walking away with tens and tens of thousands of dollars of a sale proceed, what happens in a sale is that your franchise agreement gets transferred to that buyer. And so the obligations that you have under the franchise agreement just get picked up, taken off of you, and that new buyer assumes the responsibilities for operating the business that you had. And so sale is an excellent option for anybody wanting to use our network as a bit of a stepping stone, you know, build their skills, get on the bottom rung of the business ladder, and then, you know, once they feel confident, go and do something next. Or there's a couple of people in our network at the moment who are actively building the value of their businesses so they can sell it because they see our network as a vehicle to creating wealth for themselves. But a sale is also your get out of jail free card.
Yeah.
Because,
Can I just go to something you just touched on, a really good point in our model? And sorry to butt in, but you just made a comment about a way to build wealth.
Yeah.
And it literally is. We have seen so many people. I made good money out of selling my businesses. You know, our coaches, many of people do. And I want to encourage anyone listening to this that's doing their research, make sure when you're checking out businesses or other franchises, make sure you can generate wealth, because many franchise agreements, you can't, right? I have someone that's very close to me that just sold 2 of their franchises. They're a multi-franchisee. And they were all excited because they got X number of dollars, which was the value of the inventory that they had in their shop. That's what they could sell. And I'm like, but wait a second, you were turning over X number of $1,000 a week and, you know, oh, no, we don't, all we can sell is the inventory we had in store. So I got all my money back on my inventory. And it's like, well, that's not a way to generate wealth. So
the franchisor took the rest, or the franchise agreement stipulates that all they could have sold was the inventory, not the value of the business?
Over the business.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's gobsmacking. Well, in our network, if you build a business that is valuable, that's yours to keep. That is yours to keep. Wowee. Yes. Where I was going with that was I had no idea of that. Where I was going is that selling your business is also a get out of jail free card, because if this needs to happen, and it's not necessarily a choice, it's circumstances have changed. Maybe there has been a terrible health diagnosis. Maybe your priorities have just changed, or, maybe there's been a relationship change. There can be lots of reasons why operating a business is no longer achievable or no longer aligns with the life you're living. And when that happens, often you're under a lot of stress because of whatever else is going on. And that can be what people get really worried about. Well, what if something happens to me that's out of my control and then I'm still stuck in this franchise agreement? And the answer to that is, if you've built a business that's got even a little bit of profitability in it, or even if it's just got a small regular customer base, you have something of value that you can sell to someone else, and that's your get out of jail free card, because that is your obligations and responsibilities under the franchise agreement being taken off of your shoulders, and somebody else is assuming the responsibility for operating your business.
Yep. Yeah, it becomes their business. Yep.
It does become their business, yes. So sale is the number one way to get out of a franchise agreement. There's a second option. There's 3 options at a high level, but the second option is a transfer. Do you want to talk us through the difference and what a transfer is as opposed to a sale? It's very similar, slightly nuanced.
Yeah. And I think particularly a transfer under our subscription model makes it so much simpler, because under a normal franchise model, as you know, people pay a big chunk of money. And so when it comes to wanting to exit, you obviously want to recover that money. In a subscription with us, the only money you're forking out front's $1,000, and then it's just like a subscription each week. So you haven't forked out a big heap. And so where the transfer comes in helpful, I'll give a real live example. As you know, we had a gentleman had some health issues come up and couldn't continue to operate his business. He had a subscription with us, managed a friend, knew a friend, the stars aligned, and he was able to just take over that subscription. We just transferred it. And literally, the guy got an existing customer base because it needed to happen quickly because he couldn't continue the customers. He came in, took over the subscription, just paid his $1,000 and then the normal $125 a week. And he was in with a customer base and away he went. And he's still with us today.
It was totally seamless. I think that from the first call I received from the business owner to say, hey, my body's not coping, like, what are my options? I think from that first conversation about, the different options to actually having somebody else take on his business was literally less than 4 weeks. And so transfer is where the buyer, for want of a better word, doesn't actually pay the seller. And so, or there's, a tiny nominal fee, $100, $500, whatever it is. But a transfer is a great option if you've tried sale, but you haven't got long enough to actually wait for the right person.
Yeah.
Or a transfer is a great option, even if your business isn't profitable, but you do have a couple of regular clients. Yeah. A transfer can still be very effective because for the buyer, they're still getting a ready-to-go business, but with a couple of clients, a little bit of revenue already locked in. That just takes away a slight bit of that fear factor of jumping off the cliff of starting a new business. Right. So it still can be very attractive for somebody to come in and receive a transfer of a business. And so for those reasons, that's the second way that you can that's your second get out of jail free card. That's the second way you can get out of a franchise agreement really easily.
And that's the one I think is like my preference and recommendation to everyone is always sale. But in a really health is like a serious health issue.
Yeah.
That's where being able to transfer and being on a subscription, it just makes it so seamless because you're not losing that big chunk of money. And when it's a health thing, as we've seen so often, it's like, I can't go to work tomorrow. I've had, we've just had one this week that was just a devastating health diagnosis for one of our team, and they're literally bang, can't service clients. End of story. They don't have time to sell, and those clients need someone to be servicing them or they're gone, right? That's where a transition is so simple and easy. Well, it's easier to get someone in where they haven't had to go and spend, 50, 80, 100 grand to buy the business. Yeah. They can just come in, take it over, and it's transitioned, and away they go.
Yeah. Perfect. The last way that you can pretty easily get out of a franchise agreement is simply a mutual termination, because I want to dispel a big myth about contracts. Everybody thinks once you sign one, you're locked in, except that there's this thing where at any point, if you mutually agree with the other party to vary the terms of the contract, done. The terms are varied. So at any time, if you can negotiate with the franchisor or our franchisees can negotiate with us to reach a mutual termination. And that is where both parties, us and the business owner, both agree that we're going to part ways. You've got a really excellent analogy that you use that describes this process way more simply than I do. I'm going to handball to you to explain in a little bit simpler terms what a mutual termination actually is.
Because I think for those of us that aren't involved in this every day, mutual termination sounds scary.
Yeah.
But it's actually quite normal. Most of us in one way or another have signed a rental agreement for a house or a property, right? You've signed a tenancy agreement where you've agreed to rent a house for a year, and 8 months in, you finally got your house deposit together and you bought your new home and you're moving to your new home. Well, you've got a tenancy agreement that says you've got to keep renting for 4 months. So there's two ways to get out of that, and that is to either find another tenant or keep paying the rent. And we've talked about finding the other tenant example already, which is selling your business, right? So the other way is you keep paying the rent, which is where you come to an agreement with your franchisor as to the balance of the term. So it's no different to a rental agreement on a house is the example I use. And most of us understand how that works. So it's very, very, very similar to how a mutual termination works.
Yeah. And look, most of us have signed a rental agreement without even reading the document. Yeah. And most of us in our life have broken lease at least once. Yep. I've only rented a couple of properties, but I broke lease every time I rented a property, because even if it was just a few weeks or a month or so, even just because it wasn't convenient to stay for the remainder of the lease, I was ready to go on somewhere else. And you just have that understanding that obviously you're going to try and find a tenant, or they're going to find a tenant, or you're responsible for the lease for the rest of that term. And that's how it works. And it's very similar with us. And I think that brings the focus back to the reasons why we spent so much of this conversation at the outset talking about a sale. Because if you've built something with a little bit of profitability that's got some value, you don't have to break lease. You've got something you can sell. And then instead of you paying your rent for the balance of the term, you're actually collecting money off of the buyer and getting to walk away as well. And so our focus on starting people fast and building strong businesses in our network is obviously fundamentally because people have to pay their bills. No one goes into business to be a charity. But secondly, there's an underlying reason why our focus is on building quickly and ongoing profitability. And that is that profitability is your get out of jail free card.
Absolutely.
If your business is even a little bit profitable, then you can get out of your franchise agreement way easier than you probably thought you could before you listened to this conversation.
Yep, that's good.
So there you go. I think we're going to leave this right here. That I wonder if I've dropped the mic for a few people. I certainly think that you're not going to find any other franchisor talking quite so openly about getting out. But in our network, our higher philosophy is that we help people start businesses, but beyond that, we teach them the skills they need to run successful businesses so that they can take those skills with them into whatever is next in their life.
Awesome. Exactly.
And if we're serious about teaching people skills so that we can help them to get somewhere else in their life, then we've also got to be serious about making sure that our franchise agreement allows for that going off separate ways to happen when the time comes.
Yep. Very true.
And with that, I hope that you will join us very soon for the next episode of while I swat away flies for this entire conversation, I must look like a lunatic. Thank you for joining us, and I hope that you join us very soon for another episode of The Real Franchise.